you right now. This is like my country, and he's representing my country, and I hear him talking about it all the time in his classroom. So I really appreciate that. I was not born, and my family was not born where the genocide happened, but my sister married a man from Lebanon whose family grew up near the genocide. And so my brother-in-law's grandfather was a survivor, and he witnessed, the atrocities. He was a very young boy, but everyone was killed, and he was spared. And every year I just remember sitting around the table, the tears and the stories, because it's, it's so profound what happened. But he has now passed away, and most of the survivors have passed away because it's been over 100 years. But it's such an important thing to remember. So I appreciate you sharing today, Mr. Larry. Thank you. You're up.
So, I am obviously talking about the Armenian genocide. Alright, so a lot of you have seen flags like this, although this year is kind of weird to me because I'm not seeing as many. I don't know what that means, but you've probably seen flags like this on the back of cars, hanging out in the windows and whatnot, driving around Van Nuys in the Valley, Burbank, places like that where there are large Armenian populations. Well, this flag is the flag, as Ms. Shakay just told you, of Armenia. And so, when they're flying this flag, when you see people flying this flag, it is in honor of this event, right? And as a memorial of this event. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk a little bit about what it is, how it happened, what exactly happened. First, let's talk about Armenia. Where is Armenia? Who knows?
That's a good question. It's in the Caucasus. Wow.
You're cheating. No. Yeah, it's right in here. It's in between the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, right on the border of what is now Turkey. It is surrounded by, I should have turned that off. It is surrounded by Georgia, Iran, Turkey, and Azerbaijan. It has a population, as of 2015, of about 3 million people. In the world today, it's estimated that there are about 6 million Armenians, right? Our population for the world is around 6 billion, which means the Armenian population of the world is about 0.1% of our world population, right? So they're about 1/10 of 1% of the world that is Armenian. Many of those, as you can tell, are going to be living outside of Armenia because of a lot of things that happened back in those days. Armenia is now an independent nation, but formerly it has struggled throughout its history to maintain independence. At one point, it was conquered by the Persians and the Byzantine Empire, and then later by the Persians and the Ottomans, and then by the Ottomans and the Soviets, right? But there is a legend of where these people come from, right? There's a legend that says these people come from the Bible. They're descendants of Noah. Noah had some sons. One of those sons, Japheth, had sons. That son had a son. Eventually we get down the line to a guy, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Hike.
Hike. Yeah.
So Hike is considered like the father of Armenia, right? So there's a deep relationship to Christianity. It is one of the oldest Christian nations in the world, right? But genetically, some Armenian scholars have determined that the Armenians are actually a composite group of several different ethnic groups, some that came down out of Europe and others that came out of the Middle East, and they merged there in that region. So what brings us to the discussion today is what happened in 1915, right? So in 1915, Armenia was a part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire had covered almost everything from Greece all the way over to the Caspian Sea, all of northern Africa, Saudi Arabia, all of that area was the Ottoman Empire. But the Ottoman Empire was weakening. It was losing ground. It had been losing territories left and right. And so there was this little thing called nationalism that started to spring up within the empire, where different groups decided they wanted their independence. And so the Sultan at the time was trying to stamp all that out. He was pitting groups against groups. He would get the Kurds and he'd give them guns and he'd say, kill the Armenians. He might not have said it in those exact words, but that was the gist of it. And so he had conflicts. He would create conflicts where the Kurds fought the Armenians and different other groups would fight amongst themselves so that the Sultan could maintain his authority over them. All right. So around 1915, a younger group of Turks came into power known as the Young Turks. And initially the Armenians were like, good, because this is going to stop some of the stuff that's been going on. The Armenian genocide is acknowledged in 1915, but they experienced atrocities all the way back into the 1800s. In fact, I believe in 1890 or 95, 100,000 Armenians were massacred by the Turks. I apologize for this. Right? Were massacred by the Turks. And there were about 4 to 5 massacres of Armenians prior to this genocide, right, that we're looking at right here, which was clearly the largest mass killing or removal of the Armenians from the Turkish Empire. So when the Young Turks came in, what they wanted to do was cleanse the Turkish empire of groups like the Armenians. And they specifically target Armenians because Armenians were Christian and the Turks were Muslim, right? So for that reason, they went after them. And they forced them out of Turkey, or out of Armenia, out of that area. And some of them ended up walking out into deserts where they died. Some of them were shot and slaughtered. One of the things that they did prior to attacking them in full force is they removed the guns. Armenians couldn't own weapons, right? Why could they not own weapons? Because they didn't own weapons, they couldn't defend themselves, right? They went after them and they forced them out, and it is estimated that this number is low, 600,000 to 1.5 million. The numbers go as high as 2.5 million Armenians died during this time. We're going to watch a short video clip that will maybe explain it a little bit better, help you understand with some visuals. So,
listen to this from the New York Times. A considerable population is in danger, ravaged by sickness and privations of every kind, by outrages including murder, refugees robbed of everything they possessed. Does it sound like the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo? Actually, it's from an article 84 years ago about the forgotten genocide. Tonight, the Armenian massacre. Mary Omartian has a question for God.
If there is God, in heaven. Someday, people will ask question to him, why? What did we do that you caused the whole trouble?
It is sometimes called the Armenian Holocaust, and one of its perpetrators, Talat Pasha, is known to Armenians as the Turkish Hitler. Look at what is happening now to the ethnic Albanians in Kosovo, and you can follow a line that leads, finally, here, to the near annihilation of the Turkish Armenians in 1915. It was, quite simply, the first genocide of the 20th century.
The Turkish ruling elite proceeded to destroy the Armenian population, 2 million people, and this was done by massacre. It was done by deportation. It was done by rape, plunder, murder of the most appalling kinds.
As the century began, the Ottoman Empire was collapsing. The Turks, who were Muslims, were being pushed out of the Balkans, where their Christian subjects were in open rebellion. And inside Turkey, 2 million Christian Armenians were demanding better treatment.
As Armenians continued to agitate for change, they were met with more and more violence.
There was some hope when a new regime called the Young Turks took power in 1908, promising freedom and equality for all ethnic minorities. But they broke their promises, and in the name of a new Turkish empire, they moved viciously against the Armenians.
A little bit like Hitler's idea of an Aryan society, so that Turkey would be a place only possible for Turkish Muslim people, and the Armenians represented the biggest threat in the Turkish mind to this pan-Turkic ideal.
When Turkey became involved in the First World War on the side of the Germans, the Turkish leadership arrived at yet another reason to be rid of the Armenians. They feared the Armenians would fight against them, with their Christian Orthodox Russian neighbors to the east. The plan to destroy the Armenian population began 84 years ago this week, with the deportation and eventual murder of the Armenian cultural elite.
I was only 12 years old, and they took all my school teachers away. They never came back.
The Turkish authorities then turned to the remainder of the civilian population, starving some, burning others. Armenian women tried to avoid rape by burying themselves up to their necks in sand. The Turks herded people into caves and then set brush fires at the mouth of the caves, primitive gas chambers.
That way, hundreds of people could be asphyxiated in one fell swoop.
Armin Wegener, a German army medic, was so sickened by what he saw that he secretly photographed what was going on so it could not be hidden from the world.
Hunger, death, despair shouted me from all sides. The desert has devoured them.
Wegener's pictures were one of the reasons the victors of World War I gave Armenians a state of their own. The Turks deny genocide, and they deny it still. Now follow the line forward. In the 1930s, when the Nazis began their reign of terror, Wegener wrote to Hitler imploring him to leave the Jews alone. Already planning genocide of his own, Hitler declared, "Who remembers what happened to the Armenians now?" More than 1.5 million Armenians died, and there is much more information about this on our website, thecentury.com, including all of the photographs taken by Armin Wegener more than 80 years ago. That is our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
Who remembers what happened to the Armenians now? That is the whole point of this discussion today. These atrocities took place, and Hitler said, "Who remembers," right? Who remembers? So, we have to resist that. We have to resist the ease at which it is to forget something so terrible, right? Why? Because since the Armenian genocide took place, we've had other genocides take place. We've had a genocide that took place in Germany, right, with what's known as the Holocaust. We've had Cambodia, we've had Bosnia, we've had Sudan at least twice, we've had Rwanda, right? So it is not too far-fetched to think that genocide can happen again. And in fact, some argue it is going on in different places around the world. Look at these pictures. I'm just going to scroll through some pictures, and I just want you to think about the suffering that these people experienced and what responsibility the world plays in preventing these things from happening. If you can't see, there's a young boy half naked laying on the street. These are people that are laying in an area of rocks or stones, dead. Three women, looks like a graveyard. It's a boneyard. Here they are digging up bones from a mass grave. So, these people to this day have not received justice. Why? Because the Turkish government refuses to acknowledge that a genocide ever existed. What they say is that it was mutual combat, right? These are things that happen in war. The Armenians were fighting against the Turkish government, and as a result, some of them died, right? Some of them just happened to die. But historically, we know that there was an intentional effort to cleanse the empire of the Armenians. Yes, there were Armenian nationalist militants, but we're looking at babies. They're not combatants, right? So all these people were murdered. Genocide was committed against these people, and there needs to be some justice. So this date is coming up, Tuesday. You guys are in school, so while you're at school, there's not a whole lot you can do out there in the world to acknowledge this or to prevent this from happening, to march on this, but there will be marches. But how can you get involved, right? You can get involved by learning more about it. This is my philosophy. It's called the Armenian genocide because it happened to Armenians. But Armenians don't own it. It's owned by the world. Genocide affects the world. It doesn't affect only the group it happens to. It's a responsibility that all of us have to take up. If we don't, then it happens again, because it's always them. It's always those other people. It's never me. And until it's me, I have no responsibility. I have no reason to act. And that's dangerous. That is a dangerous philosophy. On Sunday, because we have school on Tuesday, if you want to participate in something, I recommend this. In Montebello, at the Armenian Memorial, they're going to have a ceremony. It says that they're inviting the public out to participate in the 103rd anniversary. It's going to be held at 2 o'clock at the Armenian Genocide Memorial Monument, which is at 900 Via Clemente in Montebello. Some of you may have been to Montebello. It's kind of right on the other side of East LA. So if you have a chance and you do want to participate, you want to get involved, this is something you can do. All right? This is painless. other than the gas money or bus fare it takes to get there, right? For those who don't come to school on Tuesday, come to school on Tuesday. But if you don't come to school on Tuesday, I hope this is where you are. There's a march that starts at noon at Pan Pacific Park, and they're going to be marching to the Turkish consulate, right? Demanding that Turkey acknowledge the genocide. A sad thing about this country we live in that just bombed Syria for atrocities committed against children over there, chemical weapons usage. The United States will not acknowledge the Armenian genocide. Now, the U.S. had acknowledged the Armenian genocide. The U.S. was there when it was going on. The U.S. diplomats sent letters home expressing the level of depravity that the Turks had gone to in killing the Armenians. But today, Turkey is our friend. It's our ally in that region. We need them as a strategic partner. So we don't deal with that issue. We don't talk about genocide with the Turks, right? If you ask the U.S. government to acknowledge it, they won't. Several attempts have been made in Congress to pass bills acknowledging the genocide, and they've all been shot down. I believe the most recent one was 2015, 2016. It was shot down. If you ask people who sit on the committees that deal specifically with Turkey, whether there was a genocide, they will not admit to the genocide. The world acknowledges the genocide. The U.S. will not. So, the purposes of going here is to confront Turkey, at least symbolically, right? I don't think Turks are going to come out and be like, yeah, let's talk about it, right? But it's a chance for people to say, we know and we don't accept it. This is your chance to say, you know and you won't accept it. If you want to find out more information, there's some sites or links that you can go to get additional information. You can see me about it. On Monday, here at Cloudfire, we can do our own little part to kind of learn a little more in the form of a movie. So after school, we're going to show The Promise. Some of you may have seen it last year when it came out. It's a movie about, or it takes place during the Armenian genocide, right? So you get to see some of how life was like. And this movie was controversial. It took a long time for this movie to be made. And it wasn't until a very wealthy Armenian businessman named Kirk Kerkorian gave money to the makers of this film that it got made. No one wanted to make this film. The Turkish government didn't want this film made. At one time, there was a movie called 40 Days and Musada that was going to be made, or was being made, and the Turkish government said that they would ban all American films from the Turkish, from Turkey. So studios in America have backed away from these kinds of things. And finally, this film is out. We're going to show it. Some people, some Armenians that I've talked to, felt the film was a little soft, right? But it's a step forward, right? You kind of get an idea of what happened. There's not going to be blood splatter everywhere and that kind of thing. So if you're into Saving Private Ryan scenes, you're not going to see that here, but it's a great story to follow and to learn. So to be here in the huddle, YBPC will be selling snacks, right? We'll start at 3:15. It's no obligation. I just hope that you would have an interest. I'll be here to watch, and I'd like to have some company. Yes, sir.
I would like to urge people to make sure they do that. it's really hard to have a personal connection with any of this stuff because you just see photographs, and yeah, they look horrible. I'm too young, of course, to have seen anything of the Armenian genocide, and too young to have seen the German genocide during World War II, but I have seen the tattoos of the prisoner numbers of German Jews on their arms of people who are now, died. But what made it really personal for me was in Washington, D.C., there's a Holocaust museum. It's about a 5-story building, and around the outside of inside, but along the outside edge of the building, there's a long ramp that goes all the way down those 5 stories, 4 or 5 stories. And you start at the top, take an elevator up, and you see all these photographs all the way down. And some of those photographs are below a railing so the children can't see them, really small children. And I don't remember the details of all that I saw, but I do remember I was emotionally unable to make it to the bottom of that museum. Just watching those pictures and see the horrors of what happened made it awfully real for me. And that's why I urge people to see this. This is as close as we can come easily right here in our school.
Amen. All right, so I hope to see you here Monday after school. I'm going to start the film about 3:15, and I'll probably